Hello, hello. Welcome back to the show. I'm so excited because today we have a super special guest here. Not only is Gina just an incredible woman and entrepreneur, she's also a friend and a past and current client. So I'm really, really excited to have Gina Jones on, who is a registered dietitian nutritionist specializing in functional medicine nutrition. Gina holds a master's degree in clinical nutrition from Case Western Reserve University. Gina is both academically and professionally trained from Cleveland Clinic Foundation and an alumni of Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. Through healing her own health struggles and autoimmune diseases, thyroid disease, and food intolerances, Gina has found her passion in practicing functional medicine nutrition. She's the owner of INW Center, where she provides individualized nutrition care, as well as partners with other health providers, companies, and patients to share nutrition knowledge. Gina is also the founder of Crunchy Kitchen, an allergen-friendly food business where she's been able to combine her love for food and her nutrition expertise. She has successfully improved patient vitality and health through functional medicine, patient-centered approaches. And Gina, in her various roles as a dietitian and also a very busy mom, is able to share her knowledge through consulting, writing, recipe sharing, public speaking. I'm going to add coaching, mentoring, and seriously just being such a light on the internet when there's so many confusing things out there. There's just so much noise. Gina has contributed to major publications like Parent Magazine, Vitamin Shop, Dietitian Central, A Sweat Life, Thyroid Cure, and more. So to say that Gina knows a thing or two would be the understatement of the decade. But I think I'm most excited today to dive into how this all relates to entrepreneurship. So Gina, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I was so excited. So I'd love for you to just do a quick intro of yourself. I obviously read your bio, but you are still so much more than what those words all say. So can you take us back to, where this really started and also the entrepreneurial journey and where that started? Because we look at you now and all these awards and accolades and recognition, and it's like, cool, where did you start? So how did this all begin? You went to school to be a registered dietitian and all these things, and yet you're running your own multiple businesses. So what does that look? Yeah. What does that look like?
Yeah. So it kind of, I feel like I've always wanted to be a business owner ever since I was a kid. So it was already bred in me. But what happened was I went to business school. So I actually have a bachelor's degree in business and marketing. And when I was working at a very well-known company in marketing, I got pregnant with my first daughter and got a lot of symptoms and issues. And during that pregnancy, when I was sick, I started to dive into nutrition. And just a month or two after she was born is when I ended up being diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune version of a thyroid disease. And that kind of spun out to the point where I just went full force into how do I heal my body? And that's what led me to go back to school and to get the master's degree in nutrition. So through all of that, is kind of, where I started to develop Crunchy Kitchen for the food business, because I needed things that were going to be helpful for me at that part in my journey. So even though I don't follow restrictive diets or anything like that, that was just something that came out of my journey in the beginning part. And now I'm able to serve my clients much better in a private practice than I was from a hospital perspective, because there's just so much more I do with my clients now that can really help their transformation. So it really started as my personal journey of I got really sick and I need to figure out a way of healing this. And it just kind of took off from there.
Okay. So you're really sick. You're struggling to figure out what you could do to heal this, and you're pregnant with your first child. So at what point did you think, yeah, this is a great idea to start either going back to school, but also starting a business venture? Like what?
Yeah. It sounds a little crazy. Hindsight. I always say that's kind of me. I'm like an all or nothing. I'm either doing 1,000 things or nothing at a time. And that was one of the points where I felt like I was doing all the things at one time, which I've definitely learned how to manage a little bit better now. But what was happening was I started diving into nutrition just on a pregnancy standpoint before I started getting symptoms. So I was already in that world a little bit and learning okay, what nutrients do I need more of? What foods do I need more of? Just really trying to make sure my baby was as healthy as she could be. And then towards the end of the pregnancy, I was getting weird complications and things that the doctors thought were going to happen that never actually happened. And towards the end of that pregnancy is when I was like, okay, maybe there's something more to this. Maybe there's a genetic standpoint. And that's really when I started to dive in. And then the few months later, when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, that was really my wake up call. So I had to change my diet at that point. I had to do these things, but I was exhausted and didn't want to leave bed. And I had a newborn. And so I wasn't thinking about starting a business at that point. But when I was like in the kitchen, when I had some time to figure out what I could eat and not have to cook all the time, is when Crunchy Kitchen was kind of like created, because I was like, there has to be other people out there that are exhausted and want healthy food, but they don't want to be in their kitchen 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So that started about when my youngest daughter was a year old. And that is when I was starting to feel better finally. It took a long time.
So how long ago was this?
Better. This was in 2012.
Wow.
Yeah. So it took me probably a good 8 months for symptoms to drastically reduce. And then when I was like, okay, I feel good, I know what I'm doing. That's when I started to learn more about nutrition. And before she was a year old is when I enrolled and started my prereq classes to go back. And it fell into place very like, I don't know, just the way that I thought it was supposed to be. And exactly the way in my mind that I had it planned out is exactly how it went. And it went really nicely. And I got to work where I wanted to work. And I completed everything in a timely manner. And it was a big journey, but I felt like because of that, I can help so many more people. And just like a side note, my clients always tell me, they're like, I love that you've been through everything you've been through, because every symptom they have, I've already had. So it's like it comes full circle.
Well, it's so interesting. There's a lot I want to unpack here. And the first thing we can start with is that. So it's really interesting. You can have people saying, I'm so grateful that you share your story and you can relate and you can resonate. And here you are, living proof of all these things. But on the other side, I know I've worked with so many entrepreneurs and coaches who actually have this bubbling up of fear and uncertainty and almost imposter, because who am I to be teaching about health when I'm struggling, for lack of a better term, with my own health? And so did that ever come up for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think it still does too sometimes. I think it's like the more you like dive into other people's health and you want them to be better and get better and you want to help them on that journey, I think that's normal for that to come up for almost every healthcare provider. So that did pop up a lot in the beginning, but I think in the beginning, before I started to create my own business, I was getting a lot of reps while I was at the Cleveland Clinic. So I saw a lot of unique cases and I saw thousands of people from all over the world. So it really created a little bit more confidence as far as, okay, yeah, like, you know how to do what you're doing. And that part of it, I'm very thankful for, because I was able to learn it at a great place. But on my own, for sure. And I think it's really good to have like a network of other dietitians and other providers that you can bounce ideas off of and just have that good connection with, because that starts to build. And when you're in those containers, like, because Empower was one of those for me, but being in these little containers of people that you trust and know what your growth pattern is looking like, whether it's personally as a dietitian or on the business end, I think can really help you overcome those obstacles as far as like doubt and things like that.
Yeah. So it sounds like for you, time and just repetition. I love that you said that, because people want this shortcut. Everyone's looking for, the overnight pill, the quick fix to whatever it might be, a personal journey, a health journey, a business journey. But you literally said it was the repetition that built the confidence. So what would you say to the person who's listening right now who doesn't have the opportunity or hasn't put in enough reps yet? They're just starting out as a business owner, as a coach, as an entrepreneur. What would you say to them is a way that maybe looking back, you can help them kind of overcome some of those limiting beliefs? Or how do you navigate it? How would you say to manage it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first biggest thing is any repetition you get is great. So whether it's 1 or 1,000, like just learning and doing the work and working with clients is huge. Like I talk to people about this all the time. I used to start, when I first started my business, I was out there doing like grocery tours and like free speaking events and like all the things just to get in front of people to like talk about health. So the more you talk about it, whether it's to your spouse or your kids or whoever, you're teaching yourself that information. So it doesn't have to be that you're teaching a room full of clients or paying clients, like literally just talking about the material and telling people how to heal their body in whatever you're teaching them is really helpful. And it doesn't need to be this huge, big thing. It's like repetition just in the information, is helpful. So that would be one thing I would say is just like learn the information and be able to reciprocate that information so that you know how to do that.
Okay. So go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, like, you're your own best client too, because if you can follow what you're doing, and I always tell my clients, like, I don't have you do anything that I've never done myself either. So if I want them to go on a diet, I've tried the diet. So if there's something that's been going on, which I don't really use restrictive diets like that anymore, but supplements, all those types of things, like you can try on yourself too and make sure that things work as long as you're, within that same realm and that's appropriate for you. But you can be, case study one.
Yeah. And I think naturally we are. It's just like the evolution that you went through where it was, I'm going through this thing and then I'm learning about something and I'm interested in learning because I want to be able to, better my knowledge or heal myself or whatever that might look like. And then it's very natural to say, wait, I want to share this with people. And then you sort of accidentally built a business, right? You're like, I just want to share this with people, whether that's through content or conversations, or I know for me, it was blogging, back in 2012, I was blogging. It's like, let me just share what I'm learning with people because it might help somebody. And I don't want people to struggle the way that I did, like you said, with Crunchy Kitchen. So I can hear the eye rolls. I can hear the eye rolls right now that are going on because the repetition is great. And I agree with it. The time is great. And I agree with it. The trying it on yourself is great. And I agree with it. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for that. I think there's too much regurgitation going on where people aren't trying or doing or embodying first. So what does it feel like now versus what it felt like when you started, when, you're talking about the same thing, for lack of a better term, over and over again, and it gets boring? Because I can hear the eye rolls. People are like, okay, Gina, I don't want to keep talking about the same thing. Yeah. Okay. Repetition, but I'm bored. What would you say to the coach, the entrepreneur, the business owner who's like, oh my gosh, I'm so bored about talking about the same thing?
Well, I think that's a great thing about being an entrepreneur because you don't have to ever make it the same thing. And I don't feel like I've ever had the same conversation twice. Like even if you're talking about the same health concern, like if I'm talking about Hashimoto's, every single person or every single event or podcast or magazine interview that I do, it's always different. And I love that because everybody's personal experience is different. So when you're talking to a client, you need to talk directly to them. So we're not just giving protocols. We're not just saying, okay, this is one size fits all, or at least I don't. It is very unique to you. So if you are having the same conversation and it's boring every single time, there's something off, I think, there, because it should be very specific to who you're talking to. So you're going to be different than me and vice versa and the next person. So I understand what you're saying, but I think that one, I would look more internally, like, okay, so what part do you enjoy? Because I don't just talk about Hashimoto's. And if I am talking about Hashimoto's, everybody's experience is so different. So I might have one person with one set of symptoms, like they might get more digestive symptoms, and I might get somebody else that has more throat symptoms, and I might have somebody with all of them. And our conversations are going to be very much about, okay, why is this happening? And that in itself just creates a different conversation with each person. So the repetition, I think, is good in the form of you need to know your material. You need to know what you're teaching and how it works and how the body works, but you have to also know how to apply it. So if the conversations are the same and you're getting bored, either you don't enjoy the topic that you're talking about, or we need to figure out why it's not correlating to that specific individual, at least from my perspective.
Oh, I love it. And I'm just thinking for me in like the business realm, this is exactly why we don't give people sales scripts for sales calls, because it's not a script. We're not going through the checklist of things that we want to talk about. It's not a to-do list on a Post-it note. It's a conversation with a real human. And so our job, just like you, is to listen and let the conversation be guided by what you're hearing. So when you're having these conversations and you're hearing this feedback, maybe the struggles that people are having, the challenges, maybe the wins that they're having, what does all of that information do for your business?
A lot, because like, well, personally, I think personally, it's like, oh, okay, like I resonate with this person because I've been through this. I know what it feels like to be in a place where you're frustrated and you have all these symptoms and you just like, I just want to be healthy. I want to get this gone. So I understand that from like a personal perspective, and I'm very passionate about those clients. And then, from like a business perspective and how that affects is like, I want to take that information in because then I know what my clients are looking for and I know how to talk to them and I know how to be able to say, basically what are they looking for and how am I going to give this to you so that I'm more clear and I know, and I'm very open with them and transparent about what I can offer and what I can't offer.
Yeah, I love that. Allowing the information from your actual audience to sort of steer the ship, which again can often lead us to a place where, well, I don't really want to talk about this, or I'm bored of talking about this. But when we're in business, we both know it's not about us. It's about the client. It's about the audience. So I love that you're just actively listening and using that information to kind of fuel where the ship is going to go and the direction that it's going to go. So I don't know much about Hashimoto's.
Okay.
And I don't know what I don't know. So now in your journey, is this something that is still like relevant in your life? Has it just transitioned? Is it kind of at bay? What does that look like now? Because I want to make this shift and talk about entrepreneurship and health. And I want to talk about what that looks like. So is this something that still comes up for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to kind of make the distinction because I think it is hard if you've never had like a chronic illness, it's really hard for people to understand what having a chronic illness and trying to run a business looks like. It's very different from start to finish. So when I first started, and when I say I'm sick, it wasn't just like I'm tired and I have some digestive issues going on. I physically couldn't get out of bed with an infant. I had to call 911 several times a month because I thought I was having heart attack symptoms. It was to the point where it was just, I was so sick. That was the sickest I've ever been in my entire life. I don't wish it upon anybody. Wow. And a lot of traditional ER doctors, practitioners just missed what was happening. And that was the scariest part about it because clearly my symptoms were there, but labs were coming back normal. So that's really what fueled the fire for me of saying like, okay, if this is happening and, I have a lot of good medical care at my disposal, what's happening to everybody else? So that's really kind of like what fueled the fire. And I was very exhausted. It was hard to function on a daily basis, just like showering and making my food. And so I never want it to seem like, oh yeah, it was easy from the get-go, because it wasn't. Yeah. But then from now, about a year in, I felt pretty good, but I still had symptoms. And then now I'm like 10 years in and I'm pretty much symptom free. There's certain things that pop up that will give me a flare up or start to kind of cause some symptoms, but I know how to manage them. I know exactly what to do. And I know what is off even before the symptoms start. I'm like, oh yeah, like I didn't sleep for 4 days in a row because my child was sick or something like that. So those flare-ups can still happen, but I know exactly how to manage them. So I'm able to do all the things that I do now. Like I'm a mom of 2 and I have 2 businesses and I volunteer at school and I do my personal investments, all these things, because I feel good enough to be able to like run my businesses and run my life the way that I want to. So in the beginning was a complete 180 from where I'm at now. So yes, it still pops up, but it's not nearly as bad as where I was in the beginning.
Sure. And you're mindful now, you sort of know the triggers for things that are going to, So sleep, can you share any others?
Yeah, absolutely. So sleep is a big one. Toxins for me specifically is a big one. So I talk a lot about like root causes with my clients, and there's about 8 root causes or general ideas of root causes that we look into. So there's like nutrition and hydration and stress and sleep. There's toxins and infections. So there's all of these different things that we look at. And mine personally were related to toxins. So if I get exposed to too much mold or a lot of fragrances or things that I'm not used to, it'll start to trigger some of my symptoms, but I know exactly how to kind of help them and to calm those down, where someone else's might be more stress related or sleep related. And if that's the case, that's very common too, because if you're really stressed out at work and you have financial struggles and all these things, that's going to definitely increase your symptoms too. So there's about 8 that I think are really common for people with Hashimoto's specifically, toxins is one of the most common.
Wow. It's so interesting when you're listing them off. I'm like, sleep, nutrition,
Yeah.
water, stress. I'm like, all things that usually fall to the wayside for so many entrepreneurs, especially when they're starting a business. It's like 9 out of 10 times it's the first thing to go when we have so much to do and we're so busy and we're so stressed. Then we skip the gym. We don't do movement. We don't take walks.
Right.
We grab the ice cream. We don't eat real meals. We live off of coffee and chocolate. Not that I'm speaking about myself. But it's so interesting that these little things could add up to be something so much bigger. And what I think is really important for the listeners to really grasp onto is imagine what these things are doing to you, the listener, even if you don't have something like Hashimoto's or you don't have physical symptoms appearing. It's wow, how is that actually affecting my body and my health and my internal health? And what is that looking like? We all talk about wanting to biohack or to optimize. Everyone's interested in optimizing their energy and optimizing their health. And it's like, just because we can't see it through some sort of a symptom, it must be affecting us, right?
Oh, 100%. And I will say too, I worked at a lot of corporate places before I became an entrepreneur. And I think it was, and this is more of like a US thing, and I don't know if it was when you were a teacher, but it was like normal for no one to take a lunch and to like work at your desk while you ate your sad salad. Like, and it was just normal. That was the culture. Like you never left your desk, you worked through lunch, you came in early, you left late. And that in itself creates stress, right? You're not balancing. Like work-life balance doesn't truly exist when you're in like a corporate world, because you're at their disposal, like whether you like it or not. And for some, that's great. They love that. But that created more stress in my life than I wanted. And that was another turning point when I went full-time in my business, when I was like, okay, this is actually less stressful to start my own business, to be in control of my schedule, to be able to be there with my kids, to do all the things that I want to do and not have to ask for permission. So that became, and I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, is like, you pick your stress. And for me, entrepreneurship was less stressful than having to like punch a clock every day on the corporate end of it. So
I feel like that is so relatable. And it's crazy to say that, because entrepreneurship is not easy.
Oh, super scary.
So you left in 2019, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So you left in 2019, you went all in on entrepreneurship. You're running these 2 businesses. You have these 2 children. You're somehow just like superwoman. And so I love that you said, pick your stress. Now I'm guessing that there are stressors that pop up in being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, of course.
So what are some of the tips or tricks that you have for the people that are listening to navigating them? Because, I love that you mentioned this sort of autonomy where when you're in corporate, you might be punching the clock or your lunch is scheduled at this time. And I'm sitting here going, okay, funny enough, when I was a teacher, I never missed lunch. I might be working during lunch, but it was a particular period of the day, 11:47 every single day. Like that's the time that I got to eat. Now, as an entrepreneur, I'm finding it more difficult for myself, especially as someone scaling a company, or a lot of our listeners are starting their business. And I feel like it's the opposite, because we're just working. And the business is really running our life. It's really this beast that's taken over. So do you have any tips or pointers for someone listening who can then maybe manage their time better, manage their health, their energy? What would that look like?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is that you want to have like good habits in place, even before you kind of go out on your own and dive headfirst into entrepreneurship. So
coffee and chocolate.
Right. Those are my notes. Chocolate. Yes. I eat chocolate all the time, but so what I did is like, going from corporate, like I woke up at a certain time, I ate breakfast at a certain time. So you kind of had like a habit already formulated, but there's still stressful components there. So what is nice is like when you move to entrepreneurship, you can take out the parts that you don't like. So maybe you can wake up a little bit later and maybe you can have a lunch at a time that is better for you and at 11:47 in the morning. So those things you can do, but then you also want to make sure, I find, and I tell my clients this all the time, like you want to schedule in, okay, I'm going to eat lunch today, because a lot of times I have a lot of entrepreneur clients too. And they always say like, I just forget to eat sometimes. Like I'm working and I forget to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that before too. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I've done it
I'm
too.
raising my hand.
Yeah. And I've done that. And what happens is then, we're giving our body a different stress. We're saying, okay, she forgot to eat. And now we have to figure out what the body needs to do next. So is it, we need to hold on to these calories next? Does cortisol go up? Do the hormones go off balance? Like what happens next? Blood sugar tanks. And then you tend to get a symptom from that, right? And then that takes a while before your body is like whispering to you, and then it's like tapping on you, and then it eventually smacks you across the face. And you're like, oh yeah, I need to like listen to what my body's saying. So having those good habits in place first is always helpful. So making sure you're eating regularly throughout the day, making sure that you're drinking water and you're not just hydrating on coffee and that's it, making sure that you're getting outside at some point during the day, and just for like light and movement and natural movement is all very helpful. And I found so I started my private practice in 2017 and I didn't leave the clinic until 2019. So I had 2 years of kind of like half doing it before I jumped all in, which didn't make it any less scary. But when you jumped all in, I was really in it and I really wanted to make it work. So I was the person that was working like around the clock, making sure that I was doing all the back end work and making sure my clients had everything they needed. And I was working a lot to make that happen. And I just completely forgot to like exercise for like months at a time. And I was like, that wasn't a priority. Like the business was a priority at that time. And I didn't follow my own advice until I realized what I was doing. And then I was like, oh, okay, like, no, you stop at this time, you're going to go outside. So creating boundaries around your business and your life to make it the way that you want your life to be. And I think that was like a big, I would say challenge and a big flipping point for me, because it was like, oh, I want the business to work, but the business isn't going to work unless my body is taken care of and my body's working. So making sure that I was healthy enough and maintaining health so that I could still give back to my clients the way that I needed to.
Yeah, it's that old adage, right? Put your oxygen mask on first, fill your cup up first. Exactly. And it's so easy to say, but we don't do it. So it's funny. You're saying these things. It's very simple. Schedule it in, create boundaries, go outside, make sure you're eating and drink water. It's like 5 very simple things. However, I can feel the resistance because it doesn't feel sexy when you're telling me to schedule food in. Now I feel like I've lost the freedom and autonomy, right? It's like I'm an entrepreneur so that I have the complete freedom. And now you're telling me to put lunch on my calendar? Like that sucks.
Yeah. I mean, for some people it does, because you're like, when I'm in a groove, I don't want to stop and get up and eat. And I completely get that. I've been there, you've been there. But at the same time, the things that are like life-changing tend to not be super sexy. They're normally these are like the nitty-gritty, like down in the trenches, like this is what we're doing right now, just for your body to like be safe and comfortable with where it's at. So it's not always super sexy. And I find that with my clients too, is like some of the things we work on is like blood sugar balancing and like how to make a well-balanced meal. Like those aren't sexy things. It's not like a pill or a tea that is promising you the world, right? These are things that are like every day you have to do them so that your body is safe and healthy and taken care of. So I agree with you.
Yeah. I'm like screaming it from the rooftops. The things that are life-changing are not super sexy because it's the exact same thing in business and people just don't want to do the foundational work. It's literally the same thing as like niche and ideal client and making sure you know your values and who you're speaking to and what do they need and solutions and problems, right? All of these things are not sexy. What's sexy is the Maserati marketer who's posting pictures of, the Ferrari and the Maserati promising that you're going to make $1 million in 35 seconds. But that's not the reality. The reality is the foundational work. And so what happens to an entrepreneur? What could happen? What does it look like when an entrepreneur has these things on lock? Like they're doing all of these things. What could happen to their business?
Yeah, I think that when your body is taken care of and you're healthy, and one of the big things is when you're healthy, you have energy, right? And when you have energy, you're normally sleeping well. So when these things are going well for you, you're more tuned in, like you're able to show up for your clients. You're not fatigued and groggy and yawning during your calls or your coaching calls or whatever type of entrepreneur you are. You're showing up as the best you. And when you're showing up as the best you, that is when you're getting life-changing results on the other end. And that's when you're showing up in your business, and you're investing in yourself, and you're investing in your clients, and you're doing all the things that you need to do to move your business to the next level and to move it forward.
So would it be safe to say that our health is actually part of our job? It's my
1000%.
responsibility.
Yeah. 1000%.
I agree with you.
I couldn't run the businesses that I run now if I was 2012 Gina. Like, there's no way. Like, I wouldn't have had the energy, the capacity, the mental strength. I wouldn't have had any of that if I was 2012 Gina. It just wouldn't have been possible with the way that I felt.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? And so I think you agree, happens for us. And looking back, it's kind of like, okay, I was able to take this stuff that I was going through, not only teach others and help others, but also change some of the habits and ways that I'm living so that I don't go back there again. And it's, I'm sure, not something that you don't regret, or you're not upset about, or you look back and you're like, oh, I wish it didn't happen. It's probably the opposite.
Right. Yeah. I think at the beginning, and I think that's probably common for most people with chronic illness, is you are kind of like mad in the beginning. You're like, why did this happen to me? And I completely understand that mentality, but looking back now, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. And it wasn't even that bad, but in it was really bad. So I think when you look back, you're like, I completely understand the journey, and you grow from that journey, and you're like, now I know that I never want to be that again. So you make sure that you're not. And it gets easier as time goes on. And those habits, like, I wasn't a big person that loved to cook, even though I grew up in a family that loved to cook. And now it's not even a second thought. It's like, oh yeah, we cook dinner. Like, we don't go out to eat every night, things like that. So it just becomes easier the longer you do it too. And I think that's with almost anything that's in business, that's in your health. So when you start to implement these habits and they're more natural to you, it just gets easier. And then you're able to build on those foundational habits, like you said.
Yeah. There's time and reps again, man. It's that consistency, all those foundational things. It just keeps popping up. So you mentioned before getting in the room, you talked about whether it's investing in your health, you kind of glazed over investing in your business. I'm not sure in 2012 if you had the quote unquote room where you were able to be supported through your own journey, but what does getting in the room really look like? Whether you're going through a health journey, you're weight loss, a new mom, you're struggling with something, you're starting a business, like, what's the importance and what's the benefit of getting yourself into a room, even if it's a free room? It doesn't have to be paid.
Yeah. So when I started in 2012, I kind of created like a Facebook page. I won't call it blogging, but I created like a Facebook page where I was sharing recipes, and a lot of people were joining those, and I was joining other places to get into the room of like how we do this. So that was really important, I think, as a new mom and not really sure what was happening. So I think that was really important there. And I would say even now, I'll kind of do from both ends, but like getting into the room, I did a lot of free things at first because the private practice was just not at a place where I was able to invest in myself initially. But like getting into the room where I was like, okay, how do I build this business? Like, how do I learn from people that have already done this? That was really helpful for me. And then it got me to a point where, even though it was scary, I was able to invest in my business for the first time and really gain benefit from that. And I think I see that on the same end with health too, because if you're in a group of like-minded peers, and, I've done this with other clients, and I have a group program now. So when I have people that come together, there's that immediate like validation of, I'm not the only one that's going through this. Like, somebody else understands my journey. And it's just comforting to be in that container with other people that are like in it with you and like understand what you've been through. They understand where you want to go. So getting into like free rooms, paid rooms, online rooms, whatever it is, I think it's just helpful to be around like-minded individuals that really understand your journey. So, and I've done that with everything from parenting to health to business. I've done it in all aspects. And I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah. For me, being in the fitness industry for 18 years, there was a lot of overlap with just health in general or nutrition. And something that I found with a lot of clients and a lot of conversations, I'm sure you run into this as well. There's almost shame or judgment or guilt from the person feeling like they should know or they should be able to do it by themselves, because there's so much information out there, the internet and books and YouTube and this, that, and the other. So sometimes we feel like I should be able to do it alone, and our ego kind of gets in the way and doesn't want to put us in a room because of just sheer judgment of ourselves or embarrassment. So what would you say to the person who is feeling like, yeah, but I should be able to figure this out?
Yeah. On the health end or both?
Yeah. On the health end. Yeah.
I get this all the time. Like I will have so many people that will be like, well, I read a book and I'm going to do what the book said. And like, that's great. Like Google is an amazing tool. Like you have so much information at your fingertips. But the thing is that is one size fits all. The book is talking to a huge audience, right? The Google is just like randomly pulling statistics. So they don't know your specific health. They don't know, this is for both. They don't know your specific health. They don't know your specific business. They don't know you individually. So it's really hard to give you really sound, good advice that is going to really change your life in any aspect if it's not tailored to you. So when I hear people that come up to me, and this is probably a controversial one, but I have people come up to me all the time that say, well, I just drink the 16 ounces of celery juice every morning and I feel great. And I sometimes cringe a little bit at that because some people, if they have SIBO or a gut infection or any of these things, that's going to make it worse, but they don't tell you that in the book. They're just saying, do this, you'll feel great. Right. So everything I do is very individualized, as well as, on the business end too, like what you do is very individualized to an extent as well. So I think that having information at your fingertips is great because it points you in the direction of where to look. Yeah. And I think that's wonderful. But I think when you're at the point where you're like, okay, I feel like I've done everything that I can from a DIY perspective, now it's time to like get a little bit more insight, like dig a little bit deeper. That's when I feel like you need to get into the better rooms.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting too, because the book maybe the book even does say caution, if you have SIBO, this could make it worse, but you might not know you have it. So this is where I love what you do, because I've worked with literally hundreds and hundreds of nutritionists and dietitians and health and fitness professionals at this point. And something that you do in your coaching and in your mentorship in business is you actually do testing. And you have the ability to test people. And so, we're going there. We're talking stool samples, but the fact that you can bring stool sample testing, and I'm not sure if you do blood as well.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. So the fact that you are able to do that and you get a full lab report, I mean, this is a comprehensive experience. This is not, here's how you read a food label, stay on the perimeter of a grocery store. This is a comprehensive, individualized, conversation-based, like you said, protocol and result. So with that, I also know it takes longer than people like, right? Okay. Yeah. So can you just tell us about what your business looks like today? Because you started it 2017, went all in 2019. Now it's 2022. What are your current courses and programs? How can people work with you? What differentiates you from other dietitians or coaches?
Yeah. So I'll start kind of with what's different between me and traditional dietitians. So I am a functional medicine dietitian. So basically what that means is everything is looking for a root cause or a biological system approach, knowing what's wrong with you and looking at you as a whole person. Okay. Where from a traditional perspective, if you come in with a disease, like say you come in with heart disease, I'm going to give you like a low salt diet. Like it's this is the disease, this is the diet kind of perspective. So there's not a whole lot of testing done by dietitians on the traditional end, where from a functional medicine perspective, I really want to know what is creating Hashimoto's. Like most of the time, like an endocrinologist would not have found out that I had a toxin issue that created my Hashimoto's, so we're looking at the root cause, like what triggered your genetics to express an autoimmune disease, or why do you have digestive issues? Like this didn't pop up out of nowhere. Like what's causing it? And a big portion of that is testing. So every single one of my clients in my business now gets testing. And I love that, because before it was like, okay, let's work on things for a while. And then if we can't figure it out, let's do some testing, where now it's like, we take a lot of the guesswork out and just test immediately. So I do the stool test, which is the GI test, and it tests, it's very comprehensive, but it gives us a lot of insight into why do you have brain fog? Why do you have digestive issues? And gives us a lot of things to work on to heal the gut and kind of help move symptoms along a lot quicker. We also do a lot of like hormone testing, nutrient testing. I do toxin testing. So anything that would come up that would help us identify what the root cause is in somebody, I can do now. So anything from blood tests to GI tests to hormone tests, everything is included in my testing. So that I think has been a big game changer for my clients, because they don't have to wait around. They don't have to wait for their doctors to order something. They can just kind of one-stop shop it all and kind of get everything with me, which I love. So that testing is huge.
It's huge. And you were one of the first clients that I worked with in this capacity or in this arena who said they were going to include testing. And we had the conversation initially. It's, should I include it? Do I jack the price up? Which, for the record, testing generally is what, $500 to $1,000, depending on what it is.
Yes. Correct.
Right. So I've had a long history of gut issues now, started in about 2017, and I've done testing multiple times, and I always had to pay out of pocket for that testing.
Yep.
And so when you came to me a couple of years ago, and you were bringing this idea of, should I just roll it into my packages? Like I said, I think you were the first client that I worked with who had sort of proposed that. I jumped on board. I was so excited because of the experience that I had, where it was kind of like, surprise, another $500, surprise, we're going to do another test. And it was really disempowering. It was very upsetting because here I am already stressed out, already upset that I'm not feeling well. Every time I look at food, I get bloated. We can't figure out why. I'm on the low FODMAP diet, which is horrible, right? Like they're taking away all my food, and surprise, here's another $500. So you included this in, and I hope you're okay with it. I've now had every single client that's come through who's a registered dietitian. I've offered to them, hey, have you thought about this? And now I feel like every dietitian that we work with includes testing, where it's not some fancy upsell or a surprise, you have to go do this, but it's actually this container, this program, this coaching, this mentorship is going to include that testing. And that has been such a game changer for these entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's huge because and I agree with that, because at any of the other clinics that I've worked at, and I've worked at more than just the Cleveland clinic, but any clinic I've worked at, it's always an extra out-of-pocket cost. And there's a lot of times the clients don't want to do that. And then you're still kind of playing that guessing game, and you might not actually get them to their transformation in that sense. So I loved that we included it in the packages for me, because that was such a huge deal. Like, okay, you already know upfront what the cost is. You don't have to worry about spending any other money out of pocket. And we know that we're going to have all of the information to help you get to that root cause and feel your best really soon. So it's not a quick fix for sure. It's not like, okay, in 10 days or 20 days, you're going to feel, back to normal. I do have some clients that happens to, but not always. But, the testing gives us so much more information. And, within 6 months, give or take a little bit, depending on the issues, most of my clients have, back to normal, or have their energy back, have lost the weight, have, reversed autoimmune antibodies, have done all of these things. And it takes, I think, a relatively short time compared to how long they've been suffering. So I always say, like, think about how long it took you to get to that point and allow yourself half that time for healing. And normally we get there a lot sooner than that, but I do think it's not a quick fix. Got to put some work in, but there's still like a lot that we do that's really helpful to get there within a short amount of time. Yeah.
What an interesting way to reframe looking at it, though. It's like, how long have you been uncomfortable and struggling with this? And then think about how short it would be. Again, but everyone's looking for that instant gratification, and we just want the results tomorrow. So as a business owner, I'm sure it can feel frustrating sometimes because your clients aren't necessarily seeing results right away, and text messages and wins and breakthroughs aren't happening like all the time. And so how do you navigate that as a business owner, kind of keeping your spirits and head afloat?
Yeah. And I think too, from a health perspective, when you know your process and you know your protocol, it's easier to tell your clients, like, this is normal. Like, this is when we're going to expect, some changes. Most of my clients will start to notice like symptom reduction really quickly. And even those foundational habits. So while we're waiting for testing, we work on foundational habits. And then when we're waiting for testing, they're already starting to see some improvement. And then we start to include things that we're finding from testing, and they notice more improvement. So I think they're getting wins, but they're already kind of prepped to know, like, hey, this isn't going to be like a 30-day, like you're going to be back to normal in 30 days. You might be, but, so I think kind of keeping my spirits up and knowing like around this time is when you're going to feel better is a good benchmark. But then also I'm very transparent with my clients. Like, if you're not feeling better, normally that means we didn't get to your root cause yet. There's something else underlying. So if you are still having bloating, or there's still some residual bloating left, or there's something else going on that's not all the way gone, we need to dig deeper. And that's why that testing is there. So a lot of times we get to like that surface level where like, okay, GI test is done, nutrients are done, and you feel pretty good, but maybe the autoimmune levels are still there and those aren't coming down yet. That's when we would dig deeper and go to toxins or heavy metals or infections and other things. So if they're not all the way better in a standard amount of time for me, we know to dig deeper.
Got it. So as we're starting to wrap up here, we can chat forever, especially as I'm about to dive into this next question. I feel like, and maybe this is because of the world I live in, I feel like everyone and their next door neighbor is struggling with gut issues. I feel like it's super common for people to have gut issues. I think it's a conversation for a different day, because I think our food industry is, partially behind all of this. Not that they're doing it intentionally, but I think just our food is so processed and, all of these different things. So with that said, for the listener who's listening right now and is like, oh my gosh, this is me. I've been constipated. I've been bloating. I have adult acne. I have brain fog. How can they work with you? What does that look like? What are your different containers?
Yeah. So if for someone that's looking for one-on-one support, that's the highest level of support. They're able to work with me in a one-on-one container anywhere from 3 months to 8 months or longer if needed. They get all of their testing included. They get unlimited sessions with me. It really is just like an unlimited package where they're able to have access to me. They're able to message me, have sessions with me, get the correct testing, all within that group or all within that individual container. So that is the highest level of support. I get life-changing results from all of my programs, but that is really for the person that really wants that individualized support. Then I have a group container, which is specifically for people with hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, or possible symptoms of thyroid disease. So they don't have to be diagnosed. They could just be symptomatic of thyroid disease. And that container runs a few times a year. It's a 12-week program. It includes 2 really important tests for Hashimoto's. So it's a stool test and nutrient test. And there's guest coaches that come in, there's weekly calls, there's a health coach that I have that works with me that comes in and does a lot of mindset and exercise and those types of things around that to have extra support. So that runs a few times a year. That one's also life-changing. If you like that peer support, peer connection, the women in those groups are always amazing and they love to support each other. So that's another container.
And that's the one that I've seen the inside of, because you created that one in Empower and it's so juicy.
Yeah. And then I do have like a quick start package. So this might be for somebody that is just, starting to dabble. They're not sure what they're looking for yet. Maybe they just have GI issues. They haven't been going on that long, but they want some really good answers. You can do kind of like a shortened version where you're doing just a GI test, a session with me to review your protocol and review what to do next, and then 1 month of support. So there's different levels of support depending on that person. And I'm always happy to recommend what I think would be the best fit for somebody too.
Okay. Amazing. So as we put a bow on everything, I've got a couple rapid fire questions for you, just so we can leave the audience with a little extra, a little bit more about Gina. So are you ready?
Yes.
What are you currently reading?
I'm reading a few, but the one that I've dived in mostly to is The Hormone Intelligence by Dr. Aviva Romm.
What would be your last meal on earth?
Oh, that's a good one. So my Italian grandmother is 100 years old and she's from Reggio Calabria, Italy, and she makes the best pasta that I've ever had. So I think it would have to be like her pasta with her homemade sauce, some Parmesan cheese on top. I'd be happy. Maybe a meatball too.
All right. And a place that you would love to travel. You could have been there before.
I'm going to have to, I loved Italy when I was there. I'd love to go back and take the kids.
Yeah. All right. 2 left. Best piece of, it can be business or health or just general, best piece of advice you've been given.
I'm going to have to say investing in myself. That was a really scary thing for me. I was one of the people that wanted to DIY everything. So just being pushed to take the lunge of just investing in myself and knowing that I could make something more was a huge, it was probably one of the biggest life-changing events in my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right. And as we both know, our businesses only grow to the extent that we grow, and they're a reflection of us. And so we named the company and the podcast Digital Business Evolution because we're always growing and changing. So can you tell us about your next business or personal evolution?
Yeah, so I'm doing both right now. So ever since I started to work in Empower, I've been diving into the personal aspect of it. So really working on mindset and just like furthering my emotional intelligence. I've done so many things, probably a conversation for another day as well. So I've done so many things on the personal end just to get me to be my best self. And then from the business end, I would love to grow the business to a point where I can help so many more women overcome thyroid disease and hormone disease. And I don't know if there's another business in the realm, but really still concentrating on growing this one.
I have a feeling there might be. Amazing,
Probably a
Gina.
serial entrepreneur at heart.
I think you are. I think it's official that you are. I can't thank you enough for being here today. I'm so grateful for you, for your friendship, and just the way that you show up in the world. I would love if you tell the audience where they can find you, connect with you, and if you have any sort of freebies or giveaways or anything fun coming up, you want to tell them about.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy our conversations. So you can find me on Instagram at Gina Jones RDN. My website is inwcenter.com. And I do have a freebie that I will send over. So it's all about thyroid health. You can get on there, and I'll have another freebie I can send as well about just overall healthy eating and like what to do from the foundational perspective that we talked about. So not sexy, but definitely game changer.
Perfect. Sign me up for the not so sexy stuff. I love it. Awesome. Well, we'll put all of that in the show notes. Make sure you go follow Gina, tag both Gina and I, Gina Jones RDN, and I am Jessica DeRose. Let us know what your biggest takeaways were from this episode. And as always, cheers to your next evolution. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you loved this episode, I invite you to be a part of our ripple effect and share it with a friend. And please, if you feel called, take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review, and I'll be forever grateful. Until next time, cheers to your evolution.